My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm cloud hired.
So I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired. Because of Google Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the GlowCloud team.
Welcome, everyone. This is Mike Gibbs, and I am here to help you build your cloud architect career, solutions architect career, AI architect career, enterprise architect career, or any other technology career you desire. I've been an architect now for a little over 25 years. I've helped people get hired at all the world's greatest companies like Apple, Amazon, Cisco, Google, IBM, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, for example, global banks like JP Morgan Chase Bank and PNC Bank. And I want to help you build the architecture or technology career of your dreams. But I remember when I started, I did a lot of things, took a lot of training courses, and it was all in the wrong direction to actually get to meet my goals. So that's why I come on to kind of guide you and help you get to your goals. So bring us your questions so we can assist you in your career. Before I begin, I wanted to tell you about a free event we have coming this week. We have an AI architect webinar with my good friend, David Lithicum. David Lithicum has been designing and working with AI systems since 1985. And on Thursday, he's going to talk about how to become an AI architect with me on a live session on Zoom. We'll go over what you actually need to know to be an architect, the difference between, say, an AI architect and an AI engineer, the skills that you'll need to become to be an AI architect, and every step of the way that you need to go to get hired. And of course, it'll be live and free on Zoom, so you can ask David Lithicum or I any questions you may have about building your first AI architect career. And it's free, so my team will drop that in the chat box. It's also going to be in the description of this video. Hope to see you there. I also wanted to let you know that we have guides in the description of this video, and they're all free. Guides on how to become an AI architect, for example, or how to become a cloud architect, or how to win the interview. They're all free. So go to the description of this video. My team will also drop them in the chat box, some of them, and sign up, and they'll be emailed to you. And I'm pretty sure they'll help you in your career. And also, I wanted to let everybody know that we have our summer savings, which I've extended until the end of the month, even though it technically summer ended on September 21st. So that's going on until the end of the month, and it's 50% off of everything we have. So if you want to train with us, take advantage of that savings now. So at this point, let's see if you have any questions. Let me know where you're actually at, wherever you're at in the world. And from there, we'll take it from there and see if you have any questions. Tyrone, are there any questions back there yet? Cloud Doctor. Hi, Mike and team. Which soft skills have been most important in your success as an enterprise architect? And how does one develop these skills? So I'm actually going to go through. I'll kind of give you a good skills list. I actually drew a graphic, and Alonzo from my team actually helped me make it a lot better looking to make it clear. But there's, realistically speaking, a set of business skills and a set of tech skills. And all of them matter. Now, if you ask me which ones helped me more in my career, I can tell you emotional intelligence was a big factor for me, specifically empathy. And the reason that is I had come from healthcare, and healthcare is all about your feeling and being empathetic to others in other situations and emotional intelligence. So in healthcare, people get extensive training there because we have to have this soft touch when we're dealing with a patient that might be struggling. So I will say that helped me probably the most. Now, I'll tell you the other thing that truly helped me, Cloud Doctor, is prior to actually working in tech, I used to practice internal medicine. I'm a nurse practitioner. I have my own internal medicine office. And at one point in that office, early in my career, I tried to give a patient a medication that would be life-saving for her, and she said she was afraid to take it. And the drug was warfarin or Coumadin, and it's used to prevent strokes in people that have very bad AFib. And she really needed to take that medication. And I tried to convince her to take it, and she just wouldn't listen to me. And what I did is I found the most senior physician that I knew in the office, someone that was a really good friend. And I said, Chuck, could you please talk to this patient and convince her to take this medication? He's like, Mike, you're right. This is pretty serious. So he walked in the room, spoke to her for about 2 minutes, and she agreed to immediately take the medication. And then Chuck hands me a book from Dale Carnegie, and he said, Mike, you better learn to sell. If you can't sell, you'll never be successful in anything, including medicine. If you can't convince your patients to lose weight, stop smoking, follow a diet plan, they're all going to get sicker, and you'll have people dying on you because you don't know how to sell. So go learn to sell. So that became very serious to me before I ever started. And that's why I focused extensively on sales, which helped me sell the board, the C-suite, and doing things that were necessary for their business. So to me, that was a big thing, at least initially, that helped me. Now, the third skill that I say that I had expertise, which I think truly helped me, is the ability to it's called eliciting information. The ability to go out there and collect information, ask a question. As soon as you get that question, ask a targeted question, ask another targeted question, and ask another targeted question. Now, that skill of eliciting information and pulling information is taught to spies. It's also taught to executives, but it's also taught to medical professionals. Because a lot of times patients don't want to give us some information. They're embarrassed about it. They're embarrassed about a drug they're taking, for example. They're embarrassed about a lifestyle choice they made or a mistake they made or whatever. And we really have to know how to get information to take care of our patients. So I went to school and had about 7 years of training for that. So that really helped me with the ability to elicit information. So, it looks like I have some time. I don't see a lot of questions coming in first. So let me kind of walk you through, if we actually look at the skills that we need of an enterprise architect or even a cloud architect. It's a fairly similar list. And if we look through this list, I want you to see two things. The first list, as you can imagine, is when we're dealing with an enterprise architect or a cloud architect, it's an executive job. It's not a hands-on tech job. It's an executive job. So I hope you see that the non-technical skills are much more than the actual technical skills for the role. Enterprise architecture is about 80% business. Cloud architecture is about 75% business. When we get to specialty architectures like AI or security, it's about 60% business, 40% tech. So as we go down towards specialty careers, they become more technical. As we move up into the executive careers, they become less. So if you look at these skills, let's look at the ones and how I would group them together. So what I initially talked about was eliciting information. That's the getting information. And for me, that is one of the key skills. If you get the wrong information or incomplete information, your architecture will fail. So this is a super critical skill here. Now, that skill was one of mine. Now, as it turned out, I had spent a lot of money in executive presence training and executive communications training. And I will tell you that after I had that, it was like I started getting promoted, and I started getting promoted very quickly. In a matter of 3 years, I had 3 promotions. And until I mastered those 2, that didn't happen. Now, in medicine, we give presentations 10 times a day or 20 times a day. Every patient comes in and gets a new presentation. So thankfully, I had that from healthcare. But again, I took a lot of training in here, spent a lot of money, probably $20,000 at least on presentation skills training, and the companies help with that. Now, in exercising influence and sales are closely related. Again, I had coaching on both, but that made a big difference and impact in my career. But and these real keys here, these are the key factors of the biggest careers, is you have to have the business acumen to be able to understand how to change a business and communicate with the C-suite. You have to have the ability to communicate with the C-suite and the board to ever be able to close $1 billion deal, for example. You have to be strategic and help a business get to their goals, and you've got to manage a large number of stakeholders. So that's why there's so many business components of this role, because, it's a role of coordinating wherever our technology is, as well as our people and our processes and business optimization. And as you notice, as we start looking in some of these technical skills areas, we're going to be the generalist, and we're going to be looking for experts to help us. So we're going to be working with specialty architects for these types of things and potentially to help us with that as well. I really hope that answered your question, and I kind of hope that it showed you where the skills were and where some of the bigger impact ones were. Cloud Doctor, how do you stay updated with changes in cloud technologies and best practices? So, Cloud Doctor, if you really understand the data center and you truly understand the cloud, here's what you'll learn, and you'll notice that everything we had in the data center 20 years ago, we're almost getting most of those things in the cloud. And why is this, Cloud Doctor? The cloud is just renting space in someone else's data center. So ultimately, the cloud is a virtual data center that you waste your space in. And just like any data center, the cloud has compute, the cloud has storage, the cloud has networking, the cloud has security. So, Cloud Doctor, if your fundamentals are really good, and I mean for real, you'll notice that every time has something new. And I remember there was one of the principal solutions architects out there posting, so excited, we now allow IPsec over a direct connection. And the rest of us in networking say, yeah, but we did that in 1998 on Cisco devices. And then you'll see it again. You'll see the next thing. You can now monitor your traffic this way on the cloud. And it was like, well, okay, we did that 20 years ago. So Cloud Doctor, there's an Internet Engineering Task Force, RFC. It's specifically 1925, and it says that every old technology will become new again. And Cloud Doctor, when your fundamentals are strong, and I mean your fundamentals when they're really strong, you'll see that AWS Private Link, for example, is no different than a pseudo wire from 20 years ago. And you'll start seeing that really nothing's actually changed. Now, the capacity of the CPUs has gone up dramatically. The speed and capacity of the storage has gone up dramatically. Be able to put 8 terabytes of DRAM in a server to run some kind of large memory analytics, we didn't have that kind of DRAM before. Now at one point we had, the fastest thing we had was 100 megabit Ethernet. And then that went to gigabit Ethernet, and then 10 gigabit and 100 gigabit Ethernet. And now it's so much faster than that. So the technology itself really changes very little. It's just a new version of the new thing. And when I actually saw, when I was at Cisco and John Trainberg told us all to become masters of cloud computing because we're going to be designing systems for the cloud providers. And I looked at it, it reminded me of the Who song, Meet the New Boss, same as the old boss. I'm not a great musician, but, and it's been true throughout my entire life. Every time there's a new one. And even the new AI solutions, David Lithicum, who's our AI instructor and an AI architecture expert, is like, yeah, did this in the 80s, did this in the 90s. It's just a new name for the same thing, just a slightly different process. So that's how you do it. You fundamental it. And when your fundamentals are good, then what you realistically do is you keep staying updated. So you try to stay away from the vendor conferences, for example, where they're going to try to bias you towards certain things. And at the same time, you go to industry conferences. So there's some fairly good conferences for security along the way that are quite good. There's some fairly good conferences in networking like NANOG. If you're in the networking world, you could say go to. And when you're there, you'll connect with some of the best experts in the world. I used to also participate in working groups with various organizations that were creating technology standards, and that really helped me keep up to date as well. And I encourage you to do that to build your architect brand as well. work in an internet engineering task force working group if you're a network architect, for example, or go out there and work in an AI working group if that's your background in some kind of AI thing and create new standards and such things. So lots of great stuff to do on that, but that's how I do it. And the other way I keep up to date is I actually follow the executives at the tech companies and what their executives are talking about. And I usually talk to a lot of executives throughout the world, and then I typically know where the pipelines are going. But that's how I do it, Cloud Doctor. Adam123. Hi, Mike. How important is security and zero trust knowledge for cloud architects? Well, Adam123, I think it's critical. So when we were back in the data center, we had some very hard perimeters. Our inside stuff was very inside behind a very hard wall. Our outside stuff was outside the firewall, so it was near impossible to go from the website to the internal systems. Now we go to cloud computing and we don't have these hard boundaries. We've got object storage, which is connected to the internet. All somebody has to do is set something they store as an object with the wrong permissions, and all of a sudden it's out there on the public internet. We have people that now are they open up the web to the internet, their VPC and their VNet, and the only thing have between them that and another subnet is an ACL. We now have environments across various SaaS environments, and there's almost nothing you can do to control another organization's environments. We're now subject not to the risk of our systems getting hacked, but of any of our third-party providers and cloud providers getting hacked. So we're now in a world that's terrifying. When we put something on the cloud, and remember, our stuff is going to be on the systems with other people's servers. So if they were to execute a hypervisor attack or some other kind of attack, other people's systems could potentially be on yours. Now, also, you have to imagine in the cloud computing environment, let's say one of the people on the same server where your workloads are created and on the same storage area network where your workloads are, somebody that's part of the cloud does something criminal. And the FBI or whatever governmental organization is going to take those entire storage RAID arrays and those hard drives away. Now your stuff is mixed with those, and you haven't done anything wrong, but you still don't want proprietary secret information getting out. So there's an encryption strategy you need to use. There's a key management strategy you need to use. And there's a never trust, always verify. So, and then we need some kind of ways to deal with the SaaS provider. So without security, we have a problem. So what's the goal of security realistically, Adam123? It really falls down to three things: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Confidentiality. So let's say you're a hospital and you have all your patient records. You don't want those patient records exposed. That's confidentiality. Now, integrity is really two things. It's making sure the systems haven't changed and also making sure the information hasn't changed. So why do we need that? If some part of the system changed, they could potentially be putting in a backdoor to hack us, so that can't happen. Now, what happens if the data changes? What happens if we have an electronic health record that's hosted in an environment, say the cloud, and somebody changes the dosage from a normal dose to a lethal dose of a medication? We hope the nurses and doctors would catch it, but you never want to just rely on hope. So again, that's the kind of integrity we're talking about. Then the next goal is availability, meaning the systems are up and available when needed. Now, if the systems are hacked, I promise you they are not available. So that's realistically speaking what we're talking about, ensuring confidentiality, integrity of the systems, and availability of the systems. And I can't think of any business that can afford to have their confidential data taken, that can afford to have their systems go down, unless they're a business that's not making any money anyway, and can afford to have their systems changed. A bank account changed from $10 million to zero. A drug changed from 1 milligram to 1 gram. These are the kind of things we typically have to worry about. Or people changing the data that's behind the AI system and the model, what have you, poisoning the AI system, and then the AI system does everything it's not supposed to do. So it's very critical, Adam, and it's a great, great question. Taj, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Hello, Mike. I have a problem, and you can't remember all the services. There is a lot of services to remember. Is there a way not to forget them? You know what? That's a great question. I almost prefer you don't remember the name of the services. And here's the reason why. So what is an AWS certification about? It's teaching you the name of their marketing services, and it is getting you excited and biasing you to use their stuff. Now, I want you to know that as an architect, for example, let's say a solutions architect or a cloud architect, you ultimately have to design a solution, present that solution, and sell that solution to the client, which means you've got to get somebody to buy it. And if you were to walk in the room with the chief information officer and talk to them about EC2 instances and S3 buckets, for the most part, they would push a button, security would escort you out of the room, and you would never get time there again. Because you look like a fan as opposed to a strategic advisor, and the average CEO's time's $15,000 an hour, and they can't afford to waste it for fans. They need to spend it with strategic advisors. So the key is you have to understand that. Now, the reality is, let's say you do waste your time and you learn the names of so many cloud provider services. You still won't know what they are. And that's where it gets really bad if you don't know what the technology is. So I actually interviewed 1,000 AWS certified people to see, what they knew of cloud computing. And I asked them, could you explain what cloud computing was? And none of them realized that there was another data center built like every other data center in the world with cloud software that enabled them to sell that as virtual services. Now, I need you to understand what a virtual machine is. Why? Because you're going to use it in every Nutanix data center, every VMware data center, every cloud provider in the world. The only thing that changes is the names. And guess what? You can Google AWS virtual machine, it'll tell you EC2. You can Google virtual machine, and it'll tell you compute engine instance. You can Google Azure virtual machine, and it'll tell you it's called an Azure virtual machine. You can Google virtual machine for Oracle Cloud, and it'll tell you it's called virtual machine. But I don't care if you know the name of it, but I do care you know what a virtual machine is. You know what the virtual machine strengths are and weaknesses are, when to use a virtual machine versus when to use a container or application virtualization, for example, as function as a service. That's what I need in the strategist. I also need you to understand how you would size the virtual machine in terms of CPU resources and DRAM and disk IO performance that you might use from block storage that would be attached to it, and what kind of networking performance. But I don't care if you can remember the name of the services either. Because when it comes down to it, what you're ultimately going to be doing is you're going to, at least as an architect, be doing a lot more than the names. Actually, you know what? I actually have an architecture process diagram that I actually drew. So I'm not sure what your career is, but let me show you why I don't care. So if you're doing any kind of cloud or architect work, for example, or you're doing any kind of enterprise work, and for the most part, it's any architecture, but especially these two. In any architectural engagement, the first thing we have to do is meet with the executive sponsors to see what the goal of the project is. We have to determine the vision. For example, what is this? What are we trying to do? Are we trying to enhance sales? Are we trying to decrease operational costs? What's the mean that they want to do it? At that point, we have to scope the architecture. We have to get the business requirements. We've got to identify our key stakeholders. Now, at that point, we need to map out the business architecture, things like the org chart, understand the business's key business processes, key business capabilities, key value streams, and think about a way to work with that organization to make it better. After all, they want a transformation, and you don't make any transformation from taking your tech from one room, one data center to a cloud provider. That changes nothing. It's just where you put it. It's like changing your clothes from one closet to another closet in your house. I promise you it won't change your life. So that's the next thing. Now, the step after that is we actually have to figure out what the data architecture is going to look like, what the application architecture is going to be looking like. And for us as architects, that's what we do. We determine what the compute needs are, what the storage needs, the kind of storage. Do we use block storage, object storage, file storage? Do we use do we use a next generation firewall? Do we use a WAF? Do we use load balancer? And these are all generic here. Now, at some point, we're going to take that and bring it down to, say, a solution architecture. And typically speaking, if we're a cloud architect or an enterprise architect, guess what? The salespeople and the sales team from the cloud providers are going to come in to try to translate what we want into their stuff. And they'll do it for free. They get paid for it. They get commissions if we buy their stuff. So typically speaking, that's where you bring in the vendor solutions architects to say, these virtual machines will be these EC2 instances. This storage will become this type of storage on AWS. And they actually help you with that because that's their job. They're the product people. And then typically after we've got an accepted architecture, we perform whatever migration planning is going to be necessary. And that's like, how long do we need? What kind of people do we need along the way? What kind of skill do we need in the people along the way? Can we make it a single change, meaning straight from where we are to where we want to go? Or do we need to make multiple changes along the way? For example, if we needed a new AI thing, do we need to upgrade the network first? And do we need to clean up the data as a second stage long before we can get to the AI? So that's the kind of migration planning. And then, of course, once we've got that and we start working on our architectural contracts, getting them signed, we're now working on setting up governance structures. Someone will govern the implementations along the way, make sure it's going the way it's supposed to. If it's not, how would they handle changes, what have you? Change management after the architecture is done, the creation of architectural review boards, what have you. So that's what we're really doing. So the only people that really have to heavily know the names of this stuff are going to be the people that are really working for the vendors trying to sell it. The rest of us that are working as enterprise architects or strategists, we're going to use the real industry technology, not the marketing terms anyway. Because, let's face it, if you went to your doctor and they said, I'm going to give you an antibiotic and a bronchodilator and a steroid to make you better, you'd say, thank you, doctor. Now, if that doctor started only recommending the names of a single drug company's drugs, you'd start to be concerned is what's going on with that doctor and that drug company? Are they paying him commissions or something like that? So I hope that makes sense. And I hope that helps you. If not, please ask the question differently. I want to do anything I can to help. Please, if you're out there, ask questions. We truly want to help you build an architect career. Cloud architect, enterprise architect, security architect, AI architect. And if you want, let me know which architect career you're interested in the chat box, or any other tech career for that matter. Folashaki, given the extent to which AI has matured, is software engineering still recommended as a career in 2025? So Folashaki, and it's good to see you back. I think if you'll recall, about 3 years ago, I said, get out of software engineering, everyone. And around that, I guess it's getting closer to 3 years ago, we used to have a cloud engineering program, and it was a good program. And I basically said we shouldn't sell cloud engineering programs because I expected them to go away. And I expected most of the cloud engineering jobs to go away. And I said that software engineering jobs were dangerous. And I said that any kind of DevOps engineering job were dangerous. And if you'll recall, I started writing articles in big magazines about getting out of engineering and moving into AI-proof jobs, like cloud architecture, enterprise architecture, solutions architecture, sales engineering, sales, executive leadership. And there was a reason for that. See, in any of these roles we're talking about, we're selling, we're leading, we're influencing, we're evaluating opportunities and strengths and weaknesses, we're evaluating trade-offs, and in the end, we're making decisions with incomplete information. And why is that? Because AI can do none of that, so that's why these careers are safe. Now, if you want to look a little deeper, let's actually look at what the World Economic Forum actually posted recently and look at what they called the skills of the future. Now, these were the same skills I've been talking about for the last several years that can't be replaced by AI. So let's talk about what we're really dealing with here. So the skills of the past, you can see them here: programming, marketing, and media. Unfortunately, teaching, I think a lot of that will go to AI and online video. Quality control, because AI can scan quality. People like me that speak multiple languages, well, AI can translate pretty close to real time. People like me that all know exactly what to say in which culture in the world, well, AI can kind of help us here as well. So manual dexterity, because all this kind of stuff are things that AI can do. But then look at what it can't do. And look at any cloud architect, AI architect, enterprise architect, security architect. We're all doing something with AI and big data, 100% of us. Now, one of the bigger issues of architecture is creative thinking. We have to creatively solve business problems, technology problems, because there's never going to be a great answer. In most cases, we're going to have to evaluate between which of the best options or which of the worst options that we can actually use. And then we may need to create creative workarounds. So creative thinking is an inherent component to the architect job. Can't be replaced by AI. Now, this one is very special here too, this leadership and influence. As an architect, you have to manage stakeholders, get their buy-in. You actually have to lead an organization, lead an architecture team. And that's one of those things that AI can't do. And we architects do that every day. Analytical thinking is another one, not the ability to do the math, but the ability to really think and create an analysis. If I've got opportunity A and opportunity B, which is going to be a more strategic opportunity for this company and why? So talent management, huge component of the actual architect role, because we're always creating and leading architecture teams. Systems thinking. Now, I actually credit with learning systems theory when I was younger and being taught systems theory from medicine. And what that taught me is if we impact one part of the body, it will have other impacts in other parts of the body. And that's that kind of systems thinking, impact analysis. And that is absolutely critical for the architect role. If we make this change on the firewall in Japan, what's it going to do to the workers in Cape Town? If we make simply we want to change in an ACL, what is the impact of that? So that's architecture. Again, we don't code, we don't configure, but we have to think about it. So, and of course, lifelong learning. Well, we're always learning something. So that's why I said get out of software engineering. I also said it for another reason, and that's the supply and demand curve. Everybody, everywhere has been taught to code, been told to code for the last 25 years. So that means, let's face it, everybody can code. And when everybody can code, it's a commodity. Now find me someone that has executive skills, leadership skills, strategy skills, presentation skills, sales skills, who can actually design a technology strategy to enhance business performance. I can't find that person, and because I can't find that person, that is the perfect position on a supply and demand curve, which means super high salaries. So that's why I've honestly never recommended software development and always recommended more careers that were just as in demand, if not in more demand, but with much greater shortages of people. Great question, though. At what level of seniority do architects typically going out with clients for lunches? At every level. At every level. The only time that might not be is you may see a company like Amazon, for example, and they hire what's called, and other companies, they hire what's called an associate architect. Now, the associate architect is a trainee. They're a paid intern. If they've ever fully graduate their internship, they become promoted to a full solutions architect. If not, they're typically moved out of the company and they do something else. So at the associate solutions architect level, toward the time the person's ready to graduate, they'll start bringing them on sales calls. But once you're a real solutions architect, you're always going out to lunch with clients if you're working for a vendor, always. At the most introductory levels, as long as you're not a trainee, it's expected you're going to have some really good relationships with people and go take them to lunch, go take them to golf, go take them drinking. It's pretty critical for these things, especially if you're going to be working with enterprise clients where we architects shine. Because you're not going to have a small business of 3 people hire a $300,000 architect. But an enterprise might need a lot of $300,000 architects to ensure that their strategy and their execution are fully aligned. But now that's a big part of the job. Hi, Mike. How to transition from cloud engineer to cloud architect? You like working on the tech side, and at the same time, salary is a factor. So, JC, we have to actually look at it fairly carefully. Anyone can do any job in the world, but they have to have the skills. Now, I can tell you, I've taken college students, got them the first solutions architect job as their first tech job. I've taken a sales reps like Wallace at Ghana or Jermaine and gotten Wallace, for example, his first job as an enterprise architect at JPMorgan Chase. I've taken mental health people like Jennifer, got them their first tech job at, say, JPMorgan Chase as a solutions architect. I've gotten stay-at-home moms like Balwinder, the first job as a solutions architect at, say, Microsoft. And at the same time, I've worked with people with 5 and 10 years of cloud engineering and gotten them their first job. For example, we'll call him Jazz. Was a cloud engineer for 10 years, trained with me for about a year, became a cloud architect. A solutions architect over at AWS. So we have to understand that they're different. So let me kind of explain the differences, and then I'll bring out a skills matrix. And I'd really love you to come join us on our completely free webinar. Join the webinar on Thursday about how to become an AI architect. And David Lithicum and I have been cloud architects for a lifetime, so we'll also talk about that as well. And David's last position was the chief cloud architect or chief cloud strategist for Deloitte. So there's nobody more senior in cloud computing than David, and he'll be with us Thursday, and please feel free. The key to remember is it's a very different job, the engineer and the architect. And you'll get some carryover in the skills, but the skills are going to be a lot different. So if we actually look at the set of skills and we look at what we do, whether it's a cloud architect or an enterprise architect, the majority of our skills are actually here. They're business acumen, because your job is now to design a strategy, a cloud computing strategy, a technology strategy to give that business better business performance. But if you don't understand business and business strategy, you can't do that. So that's going to be a set of skills you need to learn. Now, unless you've been customer facing and dealing with $50 and $100 million deals, you're going to have to be trained to be able to communicate in front of the C-suite and the board. Because nobody's going to want your architecture because you tell them it's cool technology. I wish they would, believe me, I wish they would, but they won't. But what they will be interested in is your architecture based upon its impact on revenue, its impact on employee productivity, its decrease, for example, in operational expenditures or whatever it enables. So you'll have to speak that. So we obviously teach these things. Now, I'd say 50% of the job of the architect, cloud architect, enterprise architect, any architect, is actually meeting and managing stakeholders, getting their input, getting their buy-in, getting their expectations. So you will have to be taught that. Now, you will have to be taught about change management, and change management is not just file a form. When we talk about change management in the architectural context, we're talking about changing the culture in the organization, creating training materials around an organization or a systems change, by finding champions, building that entire plan. So that's going to be a key component of it. Now, you're going to be having to manage vendors, because it's not like we're just going to use AWS. As much as I love AWS, an enterprise might be in AWS, Azure, have 3 data centers, have 5 SaaS providers, and have 50 application providers and 10 security providers and 3 networking providers. So we're going to have a lot of vendor management skills. Now, I'd say the toughest part of the job, which is actually what we medical people are trained with, is just why a lot of times nurses get cloud architect jobs very quickly, and mental health workers and other people from medical and sales backgrounds, the ability to get information and ask the right questions. Now, this is a job where you have to create and exercise influence to convince an organization to adopt the technology, whatever that might be. Maybe you need to convince them to spend $50 million on a security architecture to protect their business. And if you can't influence them to do it and they get hacked and that business goes out of business, you'll see why that ability to exercise influence is so critical. Now, here we're dealing with business process optimization and presentation. So that's 75% of our job here. Now, the key to remember when it comes to technology, it is no longer about our ability to touch the technology. A cloud architect, a solutions architect, you're not even allowed to touch the technology at most companies. What you have to do is you have to create a strategy. So instead of setting up the networks on the VPC, you may have to craft the IP addressing strategy. You may have to craft the wide area network strategy. What type of wide area connectivity to use and why? You may have to craft the network segmentation or micro segmentation strategy. You may have to design the routing where it would be and where your routing aggregation points would be. Now, at the same time, you might have to design a zero trust architecture with context-aware IAM and AI-enabled SIEM and source systems. And at the same time, you might be designing demilitarized zones from security. And that's why you're typically going to have other people, IAM architects, data architects, security architects. So the change is to go from knowing how to build these to knowing how to design them, which are going to be a very, very different skill set. You can't learn any of this by actually doing labs. You actually have to learn the technology and how the technology works, the technology strengths and weaknesses and alternatives, and how they fit together in a cohesive strategy. So you're going to have to do the following: learn these skills, and realize that you can no longer do all of this on your own. And that's why you're going to need to build an architecture team of 15 to 50 people. And it's going to take that team, 15 of 50 people, 6 to 18 months from the time you start to the time an architectural contract is completely ready, potentially. It could be 6 months, could be 12 months, depending upon the cycle, but that's really what we're talking about. This is a business executive job. I love this job. It's a great, great job. But that's the real difference. So please join me and David Lethicum. I've transitioned many, but it's sales reps can do it and cloud engineers can do it. But understand that just understand that some careers have a lot of the skills already. For example, sales reps, and which are typically the fastest people, already have business acumen to be able to sell. They typically have CXO relevance. They typically have stakeholder management skills, negotiation skills, sales skills, executive presence, and presentation skills. And they're typically good at getting information. That's why very often salespeople get through my program in, say, 6 months. Where those of us that came from a more technical background, we typically take a little more because we have to change the way of thinking from doing to strategy. Tech no longer becomes our focus. Business becomes our focus, and tech becomes a tool to help us get there. But you know what? When you take someone, JC, that's got a lot of engineering experience and they learn architecture, boy, you're talking about some really good offers there. So your time you spent will definitely help you. It's just going to have to help you in a different way. Great question. Please join us in the free webinar. Tyron, can you please put the link to that webinar again in the chat box? I'm studying for the CCNA. Which route should you take for employment? Oh, Max Power Mag. Let me tell you about my own journey into networking. And let me tell you about the difference between skills versus certifications. So Max, in my youth, I was practicing internal medicine. I had a master's degree as a nurse practitioner. And I decided I wanted to go into networking. So I called my local computer school. They told me I needed a Microsoft certified systems engineer. And there's a reason I'm showing you this. I'm going to say this to you. So I took this 5-day, $5,000 boot camp. Got 2 certifications, a Microsoft certified professional, as well as a Microsoft certified systems engineer. Not a single person in the world wanted to hire me, so I called that school back and they said, Michael, you need a Cisco certified network professional. So I did 2 things. I locked myself in a room for 4 days. I read very quickly and I passed the CCNA. And then I actually took this 10-day, $11,000 boot camp for the CCNP. Sent out a bunch of resumes and got rejected by everyone. And when I was done with those 2 and I couldn't figure it out, well, I called another computer school. And that computer school said, you wanted to do design engineering and architecture. Well, you've got the engineering stuff. You need the architecture stuff. So they told me to take a CCDA, the Cisco Certified Design Associate. And of course, I needed the CCDP. So now I've got 6 of these beautiful certifications. And guess what? I sent out resumes and not a single person would even consider me for a role because nobody cares about your certifications. They care what you can do for them. So Max Paramag, I'm going to tell you exactly what I did. First thing that I did back then is I picked up the phone and I started calling recruiters all over the country, but I wanted networking, so I started in San Jose. I asked them, what would it take for the hiring manager to love someone so much that regardless of their background, regardless of their experience, regardless of their lack of degrees in tech, they'd be hired on the spot. Now, I created that list. I spoke to 50 other recruiters. Thankfully, I had some advanced degrees, so I knew how to do the statistical analysis and figure out what mattered and what didn't. I then built myself a training plan and spent the next 6 months learning all the things that were there. I went on my first interview. I met a gentleman named Devendra. It was in Piscataway, New Jersey at WorldCom. He asked me a question tell me about myself. I knew to prepare for it because I was told to. I answered it. He liked it. He asked me a very basic question on OSPF, a routing protocol. I gave him a very detailed answer, a CCIE level answer, and he looked completely surprised. He asked me a question about BGP, which no one knew at the time, and I gave him an answer, and he was totally surprised. And then he said, Mike, I'm going to hire you, but I got a problem. You applied to be a network engineer and you're a senior network engineer. And that was the start of my career. So let me kind of tell you to take it backwards. Here's what I want you to do. I would like you to tell me, what would you love to do? And then I'll tell you how to get there. But generally speaking, here's the process that I use. Here's the process that I use for me to get my first tech job. And I took a senior engineering role, and within 3 months was a lead architect. And within a year was on Wall Street, earning more money than I could have ever imagined. Double what I got from healthcare, actually triple back then. And here's what I did, and here's my method. So I use a 5-step method with people. My first step method is the following. You have to develop the elite skills for whatever job it is you want. So that's why I said, tell me the job you want. And then I'll tell you the skills to be great at the job. So that I personally like, and here's what I recommend. You have to be really good at one thing, and you have to know the exact job description, not the fake job description that HR worked. And you've got to be really good at the main 20% of the things that are 80% of the job. And you've got to be as good at it as the people that are already working in, say, the top 25%. That's very easy to do. And the reason, JC, it's going to be, or the reason, I'm sorry, the Max, it'll be easy to do is most people don't know where to study. They learn all the things that are totally unrelated to your career. This is step one for me. Now, step two, at least when we train people, is heavily focused on becoming what the hiring manager wants. And that's related to soft skills and a few other things. And why am I so obsessed and focused with training this? 89% of the people fail the interview due to lack of those types of things. So 9 out of 10 people get fail right here. So we invest a lot of time in training these skills when we train people. If you're not with us, go get a soft skills coach. Now, the third phase for us is building a portfolio of real world stuff for your career. That is critical, but it has to be real world. You know, people want an architect job and they try to send snippets of their code, or they try to send a GitHub page, and it shows us they don't even know what an architect is. For example, if someone wants to be an architect and they start sending us architectural artifacts and reference architectures for and standards and procedures and guidelines and things that you would have in an architecture thing, we start saying, wow, and what is this? This is about being able to get the job, having the skills for the job. This is about being more desirable, and this is about proving to the world that you're hired. All of this is all what it takes to get hired, these first 3 steps. Now, when people train with us, we're not done here. So here, after you have the skills for the job, that's when you get your certifications. So if you want to be a network engineer, then you need the skills for the network engineering job. And most of those will not be contained in the certifications. That's why we do this first. So the certifications are going to get people to be willing to interview you. What you or we do up here is what's going to get you hired. The certifications are just about getting more interviews. Now, in this phase, you have to learn how to translate your resume into your new career, create the right LinkedIn content, and get employers to come to you, which is a big part of our strategy when we teach people why. Because if you apply, you'll get auto-rejected, but when you can use the right recruiter network and people come to you, and that's not that hard to do when you know what you're doing, like we do, people will be coming to you to interview you. Now, the last component for us is we provide training for the interview. So if you're not with us, get some good interview training, because the majority of people fail the interview. The majority of people for tech jobs fail the interview, like 90%. And if you're with us, we'll teach you how to win the interview, how to control the interview, how to highlight your strengths, how to mitigate your weaknesses, that kind of thing. But if you're not with us, get a good interview coach. It's worth spending some money there. So that's the phases. But you see how these 3 phases, developing the right skills for your career, being what the hiring manager wants, and developing a relevant portfolio, all that starts before certification. Certifications are like the pretty bow that you put on a box, but they don't have enough of the skills necessary for any career. So I hope that answers. So if you want to tell me the career you desire, then we can start having fun with it, and we can start recommending exactly things to learn. Great questions. Please ask some more. Hello, Mike. What will cause your virtual machine to crash your personal computer? Well, generally speaking, I don't ever have virtual machines on a personal computer because I'm an architect and I don't touch the tech. And when I deal with virtual machines, what we're realistically speaking is we're typically dealing with a type 1 hypervisor, where we've got our bare metal server And then right on top of the bare metal server, we've got our hypervisor. And then inside of that, we have our virtual machines. But what could cause a virtual machine to crash on your personal system? Well, if the hypervisor crashes, that could cause a problem. For example, if your hypervisor or kernel caused a crash, that could do something. If the memory and CPU resources are allocated to too many systems, potentially speaking, you can run out of memory or CPU resources to crash. But generally speaking, it shouldn't. And generally, but also that's why we don't typically in an industrial setting do this. Because imagine you're on a personal computer and you've got a virtual machine on side of that personal computer, and you're using that personal computer, but some of your virtual machines are actually important. You'd have extra security weaknesses. So that's why in all cloud computing environments and all environments I've recommended, I recommend getting a server. Now, what is it you're trying to do with the virtual machines? Because I might be able to give you a more strategic way to do something that would probably help you a little better. But that's usually what could cause it. Could be an application issue too, because you're dealing with type 2 hypervisors. So you're dealing with a lot more issues than we would ever deal with. But I'm not a troubleshooting person. I'm a tech strategist. Definitely didn't spend any real time in engineering. Spent the last 25 years as an architect. So that's the limit of my knowledge. Beyond that, I'd say somebody have to start troubleshooting that. Everything from hardware diagnostics to checking memory and CPU resources going on. Chris, let's bring in or Tyron, let's bring in the next one. How long does it take to eliminate the engineering brand that a person might carry? It depends. And it depends how quickly they change. So at one point I was working as a principal solutions architect, and I had a job that I quite liked. I was traveling the world. I had set up one of the first voice data and video systems in the world to the home in Dubai. I was in every part of the world consulting. I just absolutely loved it. And I was in England and I got a call from Cisco. And if you've got questions, please, folks, please bring them. But I got a call from Cisco, and I realized that my wife had applied to Cisco. So I took the call, one of the best things that I ever did, but the position I accepted with Cisco was actually a sales engineer. Now, in that sales engineering role, I did the same thing a solutions architect would be, because that's all I really knew how to be. And I didn't do the things. The sales engineers were building a proof of concept. I was building a proof of concept team. So I was working there as an architect. And when people started to see, Mike might not be the biggest engineer, but some of the VPs and some of the directors had visited on site for a big proof of concept I was leading, and they were very impressed. And when I started to hear the leadership say, Mike's a little different. Mike's more of an executive that's finding a way to turn sales engineering into some kind of principal solution architect role, and it's just working. He's closing deals, so let's just let Mike be me. And when I got that, right around that same time, I had a manager that really, really helped me. And this is going back 20 some years ago. And the manager said, Mike, do you know the difference between a $150,000 sales engineer like you and a $300,000 enterprise architect? And when he said that to me, I'm like, please tell me. And he said, Mike, Summit is the way they see you. Your executive presence is not there. So nobody sees you as that huge leader that can walk in and command the room. He said, your business acumen is just not there. He said, right now, I know you know business, but you're not going to convince someone to spend $500 million on technology, and I need to be able to. I said, all right. And he said, Mike, I've seen you give a presentation, and it's better than any of the engineers that are doing it, but it's not executive level, Mike. Would you like an executive coach? I said, yeah. And he said, and I'm going to send you to training too. And one of the training, they actually had stage actors changing stage presence. So I did that. Now, right around the time he said, your clothes is like a book is judged by its cover, and your clothes look a little engineering like. I was like, okay. So I bought a bunch of Armani suits, better shoes, what have you. And I started changing the way I spoke. I spoke in shorter sentences. I spoke in more executive terms. I pretended I didn't know as much about the tech and started showing and proving I knew more about the business. And I'll tell you, in about a year, that brand was completely gone. Now, I will tell you, 9 months into my brand transformation over there, I will tell you there was a deeply technical problem that needed to be solved. Something where there were probably about 50 people in the world that had any experience on it. And the only reason I had some experience for it is one of my peers in the principal solutions architect team. He and I would read each other's documents and proofread them and advise each other because we were peers. And I had just read enough of his things to actually know what was going on. And I actually gave the solution, and the people looked and said, "Oh, I thought you were an executive, Mike." And I realized that very quickly that I almost let it out, and it became clear that I knew too much tech, but I got away with it that time. But it's really about showing the difference. So the techie is excited about the new switch because it's cool and it's faster. The architect or the executive is concerned with, wow, that new switch enables us to handle 3 times more transactions, and that can yield towards 3 times more revenue. So it takes some time. It's one of the reasons why I say, sales reps typically come through in 6 months, and a lot of times the engineers take about 12 to 14 months, because the engineers have such valuable information, and I promise you it'll come into benefit over the long term. But it's sort of changing the way you're thinking. And I can remember, I've seen it before, when you have nurses that are trained to be they're trained to be nurse practitioners or physician's assistants. Nursing is about doing, and medicine is about strategy and building a plan. And I can tell you, I've trained and worked with people that have been nurses for 20 years before they learn how to be a nurse practitioner. They have the hardest time with it. Because even though they have the greatest knowledge base and the greatest experience, it's experience in doing. And they typically take a harder time to transition into that other role than someone that didn't have that experience. Someone that was a nurse for a day, never worked as a nurse, graduated nursing school, and didn't have any nursing habits, and then took straight nurse practitioner programs. They typically provide better care initially because it's easier for them. Now, 5 years later, when everything clicks, that person that was a nurse for 20 years before has a knowledge base that's so strong, they become much better. But typically taking the person that didn't have it typically gets there a little faster. But once you get the person with the deeper background, they typically go a little farther in their first job because it's still a great set of skills. They just have to learn how to use them differently. All right, let's see if there are any last questions, and if there are, I'll answer them. If not, wow, I'll actually have some time today. It rarely ever happens that it's a light day with questions. So if you've got them, ask them. If not, I wanted to remind everybody about the following 3 things. Thursday this week, we've got David Lithicum coming in. He's my good friend. He's been a chief architect, a CTO, a CEO, and he's been working in this industry as an architect or above for about 35 years. He is our chief AI architect instructor and the architect behind that program. He will be there to answer any questions you have about AI architect careers. But guess what? He'll also answer cloud architect careers or anything else, David, like me. We just really want to help you. The webinar is free. It's going to be live on Zoom. We'll talk about what is an AI architect. We'll talk about the actual skills you need for the AI architect role. We'll talk about what we actually do in the role so you understand what we do and why we do it. And then we'll answer any questions we can to help you build your career. And that's completely free, and that is on Thursday. Also, if you want to check it out, in the description of this video, there are free guides on winning the interview or how to become a cloud architect or an AI architect. Sign up. They'll be emailed to you, and they are completely free. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, maybe subscribe to our channel and hit the bell to be notified of new videos to assist you in your cloud computing career or IT architecture career or ever. And it looks like we've got some more questions that came in. So Tyron, bring them in. Why are software engineers required to work considerably harder than architects? Well, I hate to say this, Fola. I hate it. I didn't say it was right, and I'm not saying that the world is fair. But generally speaking, well, you've got the architect that designs a building, and they're in a beautiful, comfortable office, getting paid a large amount of money. And then you have the engineers and the construction crew that builds it, that's lifting, that's moving, that's working really, really hard for a lot less pay. And a cloud architect, an enterprise architect is an executive, it's a strategist. So in order to strategize, strategy is based upon the best information we can get. The greater we know ourselves and the greater we know our enemies, the more likely we are to be victorious. In fact, if you read The Art of War, they say if you know yourself and you know your enemy, you will always be victorious, effectively speaking. So the key is that. So if we start looking at what does it take to be an architect, it's going to take a lot of client lunches. It's going to take a lot of client meetings. It's going to take some executive briefings. It's going to take playing golf with your client. It's going to take a lot of conversations. This is easy. Now, compare that to the software developer that's got code that's got to make it work, that's got to debug it, that's got to think about it, that's stuck behind that computer for 8 hours a day. Now, I have deep respect for that person. That person is the hardest working person there. But unfortunately, the application architect that designs what the application is going to look like, is going to have business conversations, is going to work less hard than the person that's actually doing the work. And it's always that way. You got a general manager of the hotel that works a lot less hard than the people that clean the hotel. It's a different kind of hard. It's a stress kind of hard. But it's always a different level. And that's the key, is you can choose your hard. I mean, when you become the CEO, it gets pretty hard, for example, because there's never a time where you can rest, because every piece of news can change anything. Regulations could change out of nowhere, which can change anything. You've got to make sure that there's sufficient revenue coming in, because if they're not, you won't be able to pay your people, for example. You've got to make sure sufficient revenue comes in to make sure other things are done. So every job has its different set of stresses. But I'll tell you, it's a lot easier to get paid 2 to 3 times more to go have a lunch with a client than it is to actually do the job. And that's one of the things, Shaki, that I did many years ago. I remembered I was on my first job and I was only an engineer for 3 months. And I'll tell you, here's what I noticed. I noticed that I was getting called at 3 o'clock in the morning because they could only make a change then. And they needed me to be there, in the office to make sure that it actually worked. So we had better testing. And I didn't like that. I knew that when it broke, it was a high tension pressure cooker environment. And I just didn't really love that. And I just didn't like it was constant firefighting, at least for me, because I always started out in a senior role. It was either put out this fire, put out this fire, put out this fire. And I thought it was crazy. And then I saw the architects were solutions architects rolling in. They'd come back, they'd get off of a sales call. They were having fun. Mike, what do you do? I've been in this troubleshooting call all day. They're like, we went to Morton's, a great steak place. And I was like, you guys went to Morton's? And I was here. I'm like, how do I do what you do? And that's when I started figuring out I wanted to move into architecture. So that's exactly what I did. I spoke to one of the VPs. I asked what the architects did. And around the time I had the architect skills, I ended up on Wall Street because it was a much better job offer. But that's what it is. And I wish it wasn't the case. But the planners always do less work than the doers. The executives don't do the physical hard work or that kind of constant work that the actual doers do. I didn't say it was fair. I didn't say I agreed with it, because I have a lot of respect and love for the engineers, but unfortunately, it is the way it is. As a network and security engineer, what will it take for you to become an enterprise architect? Well, the first thing is that engineering and architecture is not the same thing. So it's going to be a completely different set of skills that you actually need to learn. Now, potentially some of the skills you will have, and let me explain what I mean. If you're someone that's been configuring firewalls with firewall rules, that's not going to translate over very well. But if you've been in a position where you looked and said, okay, AWS WAF offers this, Palo Alto's WAF offers this. Given the additional features and functionality in Palo Alto WAF, like behavioral anomaly detection, our business cannot tolerate the risk of an AWS WAF. Where you're evaluating trade-offs, you're going to be good to go. Now, in that networking world, if you're evaluating, do we do single area OSPF? Well, that kind of get ugly at some point. Or is it better to do a single area intermediate systems to intermediate systems? Which one is going to propagate the LSAs and handle the LSAs better in a flat network? If you're doing that kind of stuff, that's going to translate over very well. If you're looking at the networking and saying, here's where a good place to, here's a good routing aggregation point to minimize the routing table. Here's how we're load sharing across 4 internet service providers with BGP to load share without getting out of our packets. If you're doing that, that's going to translate over. If not, don't worry. It's just a matter of training, and it's just a matter of getting the skills. So let's look at the skills that you would probably have, and let's look at the remaining set of skills that you can go to. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Let me kind of pull up something for an enterprise architect. So if we kind of look at it from a skills perspective, when you come from a network security perspective and networking, you probably have some of the networking skills. And I mean, we don't care about configuration skills here, but we do understand that you understand routing, that you would know how to route aggregates, route summarize, create a BGP policy, that kind of thing. So if you've got that, you're good to go. If not, you'll have to learn it. Now, business continuity and disaster recovery planning, that you have to understand how to get to maximum tolerable downtime, for example, and how you'd run your calculations. That you would have to learn most likely. Now, if you're coming from networking, you typically need to learn a lot about applications. I know, one of the first CCIEs in the world, and I'll tell you, there's no applications that we ever know about until I started moving into enterprise architecture. So there's a lot to learn there. There's typically a lot to learn about storage and enhancing storage performance if you're coming from a networking background. You'll definitely have some knowledge with load balancing, but we'll just have to enhance your load balancing knowledge because obviously you'll know how to load balance between clouds and load balance between various environments. But we'll have to do certain types of compute and GPU load balancing. Make sure you understand that. Now, security, it depends. If you're doing network security right now, you'll have to learn all the other domains of security. So say application security, IAM, typically speaking, for example, physical security, data security, the other ones. Because you're probably not doing that with regards to network security. You're probably doing more micro segmentation and VLANs and route filtering and rate limiting and QoS policies and, firewall setup, that kind of thing. You'll typically need to understand computing, your compute options like virtual machines, containers, functions as a service, application virtualization, the strengths and weaknesses. You'll typically have to know a fair amount of data security that most network security people like me didn't understand initially, whether it be privacy techniques or anything that goes into data classification, what have you. You'll typically have to learn a fair amount about IAM, especially in today's worlds of zero trust, so probably zero trust network access, context-aware IAM, what have you. And then you'll typically have to learn AI. So you can see you'll have some of this here and some of this here, but the rest of this you're probably going to learn on the tech side. Now, these are going to be the business skills we have to get you to. Business acumen, strategy, negotiation skills, executive presence, change management, executive communication, business process optimization. Those things are really critical. Now, the reality is you'll learn a lot of them in an MBA, or if you train with us, we would teach you. In fact, I didn't have access to a course like ours. So what I did is I got a second MBA, and I also got an executive coach and took about 6 figures worth of training. Thankfully, the companies helped pay for that. But you will definitely have to learn how to be CXO relevant. We would teach you. You'll have to learn how to manage stakeholders because that's about 50% of the job. You will have to learn how to write for executives, which is the exact opposite way we write for technical audiences, where we spend 2 pages to convince someone that they need to adopt our $60 million unified communication strategy, for example. You will have to learn how to sell and sell well. You will have to learn how to manage vendors and specifically elicit or get information in a very strategic, soft touch manner. So it's a matter of learning those and the other tech skills we have. I'll tell you, it's a great career. That's why I have a training program for it, because I love it. I'll tell you, of all the architect jobs, that was my best. And if you look at my background, where did it come from? It came from networking. I was a principal network architect with, 23 years ago. That's when, I was working as a network architect even before that. And then it was security. It was a real critical security environment. So I love that networking and security background. But those are the things that you would actually have to do differently. And I had to do the same thing for myself. Great question. What is the major difference between a cloud architect and a network architect? Well, let's very simply. A network architect designs the networking strategy. The cloud architect designs the cloud strategy and what's included in the cloud. If you realize the cloud is just somebody else's network in a data center, the cloud architect is focusing on the network and all the data center components. So that means the compute, that means the storage, it means the applications, it means the AI, it means the security. So it's a very different focus. So actually, you know what? I actually drew a document for this. I can't believe all these questions. I actually had documents prepared for this. I was doing a lot of drawing yesterday because I know these kind of questions pop up a lot. So let's look at this particular situation. Now, let me kind of show you the way these organizations are structured. So at the top of your IT organization, you have your chief information officer. And this is an executive, a senior executive at this point, and they're responsible for strategy and execution, potentially security as well. So in this organization, you'll have a chief architect. This is usually a very high paid role, $500,000 or more, that kind of thing, in a big enterprise. And they're responsible for the chief architect, responsible for strategy. There's typically a VP or an SVP of IT that runs, that runs all the technology teams that support the organization. And then you typically have a CISO, potentially a CTO here. The chief technology officer is another enterprise architect position, and the chief information security officer is a security architect / executive. So when we go one level down, we've got the enterprise architect, which is an executive position, which is mostly focused on people, processes, and technology. When we get to the cloud architect, it becomes the everything architect, just like the enterprise architect, but we're spending less time on business processes, business capability mapping, value mapping stream than the enterprise architect would do at the cloud architect level. But look what's here. All of our AI, all of our IAM, all of our applications, all of our security, all of our networking, all of our compute, all of our storage, and that's where we fit. So that's really the difference, is the network architect is a specialty architect. So this is kind of like the general practitioner, the primary care doctor you go to. And each one of them, and the network architect is like the cardiologist that specializes in just the heart and the plumbing throughout the body. But in this case, focused on the networking. That's the major difference. It's a great, great, great question. What is the difference between AI architecture and cloud architecture? Darius, the exact same thing. So if we understand that the AI architect is the specialist that focuses on, and I'll actually show you the difference in skills too. So if you look at the AI architect that's focused here, and they're going to be creating the AI architectural blueprint for the enterprise. And the cloud architect is focused on everything, including the AI, the security. So that's why, typically speaking, the cloud architect has to create a team of these subspecialty architects to actually get through the design. But let me show you this. Let me show you the differences. And I want you to kind of see there's going to be a skill difference. So if we go back to that enterprise architect, cloud architect skill set, look what you're really seeing here. The non-technical skills, now these have to be better for the enterprise architect than the cloud architect. It's expected you're more of an executive here. But look at the technical skills in here. They're networking, disaster recovery, secure storage. So it's a little bit of everything. Now, if we look at the focus of a security architect, it's going to change a little bit. Look. So the business skills stay the same between the architecture jobs, but look, now there's a difference for data. Now you're focused on data security, network security, risk management, security policies, incident response procedures, that kind of stuff. IAM strategies, encryption strategies, security operations, how to make them more efficient, for example. Now you're focused on incident response planning and business continuity and disaster recovery planning and setting up security governance and setting up application security frameworks and testing and things, what you actually have, and even mapping it out to a NIST or zero trust framework. See, all these skills over here, Idarius, they're all tech, and they're all the specific tech skills for the job. So enterprise cloud architect, generalist position, focused on a little of everything. AI architect or security architect, focused purely on the one thing, the one set of skills. And you could see if it was an AI architect, look, it would have a different set of skills too. So instead of it focused on security skills for the AI architect, the non-tech skills remain the same, but they're more focused on data hygiene and AI ethics and AI model building and tuning and testing and inference engines and data security and governance and a lot more ethics and big data and databases. So that's really the difference, is each specialty needs a different set of specialty area of expertise, but the general expertise is going to be the same with all of them. My experience, has your mastery of the skills required to be a proficient cloud architect carried to other areas of my life? Absolutely. And I hear it from my students all the time. So I can remember at a time where, and I lived in Palm Beach, so a lot of people had a lot of gravitas. And I would go to, there was a movie theater and we'd watch the movie Casino Royale. It was the James Bond movie. And I specifically remember my wife and I went to this outdoor kind of bar. And I went to order a martini. I was going to order a vodka martini, shaken but not stirred, just like James Bond, because I just was in a James Bond mood that day after the movie. And I remember being there with my wife, waving my hand, waving another hand, and they kept serving everyone other than my wife and I. It was like we were ghosts. And right around that time, I went to buy a car in Princeton, New Jersey. I went to buy a Volvo. I sat in that dealership. Nobody even looked at me. And then I went to the Volvo dealership in Philadelphia and I bought the car, nothing. It was no big deal. The people paid attention to me. Now, I couldn't really understand what was actually going on until my manager said, Mike, you lack gravitas. You don't have that executive presence. People can't feel you when you walk in the room. Well, I got my executive presence training and it was the weirdest thing. No, I could be in flip-flops. I'd walk into the Mercedes dealership and there were 10 people on me. I'd take my wife to a fancy restaurant and I couldn't even, people were running up to me. I went to the store and how can we help you, sir? And it was really kind of interesting. I will tell you that. Now, I will also tell you, as I built my emotional intelligence over the years, and I learned that a lot from healthcare first, all of a sudden a lot of people would say, Mike, this person's hard to get along with. And I'd meet them and I said, what are you talking about? They're wonderful. Could you see it from their perspective? When I looked at how I would feel if I was them, I'd feel the same way. So I found a way to connect, explained it, and now we've deepened our relationship. It's not a problem. So it helped. All of a sudden I had less conflicts. And I also learned how, when things weren't making me happy, how I could talk about it without damaging a relationship. So that carried over a lot. Now, I will say that once I mastered these skills, it had a several $100,000 per year impact to my salary. And that enabled me to do more. So I no longer was concerned about, can I afford this vacation or can I afford to take this additional kind of training? There was just never a shortage. So I was able to take better care of my family. And that made me feel good about myself because it wasn't for stuff that I could buy for me. It was, I've got a lot of family. We're full of immigrants. I was able to take better care of them. And that made me feel good. So, it carried over to a lot of my life. And the key is with education, it carries over to all aspects of our life if we like it. And these are the kind of skills, these architect skills, I call them kind of agility skills, career agility. Because you need them in medicine, you need them as a coach, You need them as a sales professional. You need them as an executive. So by developing these kind of skills, which I do, and I extra focus and hone those executive skills, if I ever wanted to do something different, it'd be easy because they're the things that help you move. So Fullashaki, that's what I've got out of it. It was a big difference for me. And I mean, a very big difference. How lucrative a position is a security architect? You have Googled the salary and saw different amounts. So in general, it is a very lucrative position, and I will tell you why. But I can also tell you what would actually be the biggest impact to your salary and why as a security architect. So let me kind of map you through that, and let me show you where the salary differentiators are in architecture careers. So as it turns out, the average salary right now, and it feels so low to me because I don't know anybody that's earning this little unless it's their first tech job, is $229,000 in the US. Now, to be fair, I don't know anybody that's earning that little, with the exception of several students that I had that have never worked in tech that got that as their first pay. Now, the range is, say, 200 to 300. And when you're talking about a principal security architect, especially working for a vendor, you're typically talking about 350 with a range of, say, 300 to 500. But what that's really dependent upon is a lot of your business acumen. So let me kind of show you the supply and demand curve that most heavily affects architect pay. So let's take a position where there's a ton of people. I'm going to use software engineering, and I love software engineers, but it's the worst position in the world to be in right now, and I'll show you why. So this is demand, and this is supply. As we go this way, supply decreases. As we go this way, supply increases. So let's say we took software development. Everybody for the last 25 years in the entire world has been taught to code. So at a given demand, which is what it is now, this is what the supply is. Now, the supply got worse because AI is doing a fairly good job of coding. And most companies are writing 25 to 40% of their code at this point, the big companies with AI. So now you have to compete with AI as well. And with software engineering, it doesn't matter if you write your code in Cambodia, Cameroon, Cape Town, Chicago, or California, but the cost of your employees do. So this is a global job. So you can see where these two intersect is typically a fairly low salary. Now let's take cybersecurity, and I'm just going to bring you right here to cybersecurity. And why is that? Because the cybersecurity forecasts are huge. I mean, shortages are huge. The estimate right now is about 5.5 million people globally that are needed that can't be hired because there's no one that can actually do the job. For every 100 positions open, employers can fill 74, leaving 26 open. So by itself, that automatically leads to a fairly good salary in any cybersecurity professional, except for the operations people, which are always going to be low paid as a rule. Same reason as the software developers. And now you add different skills. So you add, instead of building skills, planning skills. You add leadership skills. You add some basic sales skills. You had some executive presence, some CXO relevancy, some emotional intelligence. And that gets your skills here. And that's where you get your average of, say, 229 with a range of 200 to 300. Now, here's where it really changes, and changes a lot. As we start adding more business acumen, we start adding much more strategy, and that can impact your security architect's career going to a CISO role by multiple hundred thousands of dollars a year more. So business acumen is the biggest factor. Let me type this into just a query real quick, and let's see what response I get from salary.com. Strong business. Okay, so here we go. So if you want to actually see the impact of that, Tyron, I'm actually going to ask you to share a web page. It's just a quick Google that I just did, but I want to do it as a point. So open, I hope I can share it. If not, what I'll actually do is, I can't allow later. I can't quit a live stream. So will it enable me to do it? Not yet, but I can do this. I'll just take a screenshot of the browser. Shift Command 4. Go back to my slides over here. I'll paste that screenshot. And I want you to see why I'm always hyper focused on business acumen for my students and architect careers. Everybody else wants to focus on their tech, and I want them to focus on their business acumen. And here's the reason why. What just happened there? Quick screenshot, just taken like seconds ago. And here's what you see. So I literally asked salary.com average salary for people with strong business acumen, and here's why I got 727 as an average. So if you want to know where on your supply and demand curve you want to really play to earn a lot more, it's up here on the business strategy piece. So add extra business acumen, you'll be earning a lot more. Hope that helps. Great questions today. I love it. How long does it typically take to get promoted from a cloud architect to an enterprise architect or director? Well, Wallace Agana's first tech job ever was an enterprise architect. Nafuli is a student of mine in Manchester, and his first tech job that we got after him was a chief technology officer. Jermaine was a sales rep, and his first job was an enterprise architect. Now, follow the shock here. I want to give you some interesting statistics. 50% of all working, meaning 1 out of 2 working enterprise architects, never came from a tech background because the majority of the skills are business roles. So will you get promoted from a cloud architect role to an enterprise architect role? Not unless you develop a different set of skills. But that's the secret. With a different set of skills, you'll be good to go. So how do you get promoted from a cloud architect to an enterprise architect? You learn those additional skills: business process modeling, business architecture optimization, a little more executive skills. And as soon as you get them, you now have the skills for the new job, and you can be in that job. So that's realistically what it's going to take. And basically, I went from like in the network and a network architect and doing network and security architecture to ultimately going back and forth to ultimately getting an MBA, moving into it. And as soon as I had that extra business acumen, it was overnight that I was in an enterprise architect role. But I had to change. I had to get more businessy. I had to get more executive-y. So what I tell people is 50% of the people don't come from an enterprise architect job. So it doesn't matter where you start. It matters that you get the right set of skills, the exact set of skills that the hiring manager want, the skills that prove that are the job. You have that, you have every job you'd ever want. But it goes on skills. There are some people that will just leave it to time and say, well, if I've done this job for 10 years, maybe I'll get promoted. And that isn't a strategy. Now, that's kind of the hope as a management strategy, and I don't like that. So how did I get every promotion that I ever wanted? I learned the skills of the job above me, the job that I wanted, and I proved to my employer that I could actually do it. And then I asked for the promotion, and I asked for their input in getting me there. And that's exactly how I did it. But it's not just going to be there. And it was a matter of saying, well, these were the skills I used to have. I've upgraded these skills. And can't you tell on these things? And they're like, yeah, I noticed you're doing better at that. Okay. So it was a matter of proving it to it and also getting recognition for it and knowing how to market yourself. That's why we have a lot of marketing in our program, Bob, for those reasons. It's pretty important to manage your career that way. These are great questions full of shocking. I'm happy to see you. Within the IT space, which other careers might be considered to be of the same caliber, director level roles and above are typically considered the same as an architect role. So it could be a director of engineering. Of course, the director of engineering is not doing engineering. They're leading an engineering team. It could be a director of, well, it's typically about a director level role. Some companies, senior manager, some companies, director, some companies, senior director. And The best way I can describe it, when we're typically talking about like a solutions architect role, they're typically fairly entry level. So I would consider a solutions architect role manager level role. And we start looking into more of a cloud architect, except AWS. Their cloud architects aren't cloud architects at all. They're technical architects, but they use their own naming convention there. When you're typically talking about that multi-cloud architect, you're talking about senior manager, director level people. When you're talking about an enterprise architect, you're always talking about a director level, but you could also be talking about a senior director. And when you start getting into chief architect roles, you're typically VP level roles or above. So kind of hope that helps. But they're all leadership roles. And that's why they're all, typically speaking, leadership and executive pay plans, because they're leadership roles. Great questions. Okay, well, if there's any questions, ask them now. Otherwise, well, we wait to see if there's any. If they're having a good time, maybe add a like, maybe subscribe if you're not a subscriber, one of those kind of things. And as a reminder, on Thursday, David Lithicum and I are going to run a How to Become an AI Architect webinar. We'll talk about the AI architect role. We'll talk about what we actually do versus what people think we do. We'll talk about the difference between AI architecture and AI engineering. And we'll answer any question you want. If you're not sure why you're not getting interviews, we'll tell you why. If you're not getting hired interviews, you want us to diagnose it, we'll tell you why. And it's all live and free. And while it's about AI architect roles, you can ask me about any other architecture career, and I promise you we'll be happy to answer it. So you can sign up now. Tyron, please drop a link into the chat box. And in the description of this video, we also have a lot of things to help you in your career. Guides on the interview itself, guides on how to become an architect, like a cloud architect or AI architect, for example. Sign up for them. They'll be emailed to you, and they're free. And of course, we have a 50% off sale right now for the end of summer, which I have going on until the end of the month. Decided to extend it for a couple extra days for everyone to take advantage of it. So if that's you and you want to train with us, please take advantage of that 50% off sale before it actually goes away. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to take back some of my day, which is actually great. And I will see so many of you on the webinar Thursday. And of course, okay, there's one more question coming in. Let's answer that. Is there any cap on the earning potential of an architect? No, the cap is based upon what kind of transformation you can build to your client. I have clients where, if you could add 1% revenue, you're talking about almost $100 million a year. You can create some strategy, some AI recommendation, whatever that would pay for it. Yeah, you could be worth your weight in gold. So there's not a lot of cap. The biggest cap is on how much business acumen, how much executive skills you have, what your good sales skills are, how much trust people have in you and your brand. So not really one of those kind of places where we really have to work hard to actually figure out what we're going to earn Folashaki. There's a lot of room for growth here. And we don't need 3 wacky jobs to do it. Lots of great jobs, lots of great bonuses, and lots of great commission structure. But in the end of the day, what's it based upon? The results you can deliver for your client. So the better you are, this is one of those careers, the better you actually earn, which is one of the reasons why I love it. And in the end of the day, Folashaki, what is the CEO of a company? They're considered an architect. They're called the business architect. What is the chief operating officer, the chief financial officer? They're all architects. They're all business architects. So all these roles potentially can lead to other architectural roles. Plus, Folashaki, because we communicate with the C-suite, you spend a couple of years as an architect, you're going to have a Rolodex full of C-suite people you can call globally throughout the entire world that you could potentially offer services to. So I love this job, Folashaki. I think it's the greatest job ever. And so I guess we'll end there. So I hope to see so many of you on the webinar on Thursday, and catch up to you soon. Take care, everyone.